Over the course of Physics 112 in the summer of 2013, we learned about electronic programming and modern physics and education. During the course of the class, we read articles and watched videos, which we responded to and discussed via discussion boards. Next, we posted a neat resource each week, which provided outside resources about physics topics, often ones we covered that week in class. Every week, we posted a short video summarizing the events each week. Throughout the entire course, we used our Arduino Uno kit, including a breadboard, to electronically complete 15 different projects, including the final project, which required hacking an animatronic. Next, we wrote a cultural science paper on an outside science source. Finally, to get an A in the class, students wrote the pro and con sides to a controversial topic for our controversial debates. Additionally, we read and commented on all the other students' controversial debates. I received an A in this course because I thoroughly completed each assignment, including several discussion posts, the controversial debate paper, and an innovative final project. The first task each week was to read the article or watch the video in question and post a response and reply to each student's responses. To receive an A in the course, I made at least 8 responses to each week's posts. The topics we discussed included the Nature of Science article written by our teacher David, the paper on 4-dimensional human existence, the videos on Students Today and Shift Happens, the TED Talks video by Ali Charman about boys and gaming, the Engage Me or Enrage Me article about students in today's learning environment, the Educational Value of Creative Disobedience article about creative disobedience in the classroom, and finally, we watched the 90-minute Digital Nation video. This video discussed technology and multitasking and their effects on our lives. The topics we discussed in these discussion boards introduced us to important topics of physics and education, which allowed us to have a real insight in the classroom today. I responded to each discussion board at least 8 times in order to have an A in the class. In the next part of the class, we posted one neat resource each week, totaling 7. My first neat resource was about bioprinting, which used cells to create a 3D inkjet-type-like printing form. My second neat resource was a Collins Lab production that introduced hacking that we can do using our USB and Arduino device. My third neat resource introduced cutting-edge particle physics that can kill cancer. This technology reduces damages that can be caused by normal radiation therapy. My fourth neat resource introduced a persistence of vision display that could display computer images. My fifth neat resource was a mass open online course about vaccine trials, which included ethics and research on vaccines. My sixth neat resource used an Arduino board to hack a flashlight to produce temporary bodily damage as a form of a weapon similar to a taser. Finally, my last neat resource introduced the U of A Mirror Lab, which is located under their football field. The video gave a brief overview of the types of mirrors and telescopes that can be created at the Mirror Lab. In the next part of the course, we completed 15 Arduino projects. The first project, which we completed twice, introduced us to the Arduino board with simple wiring and one LED light. Here is a photo of the second project where we created a spaceship interface using 3 LED lights. Here is the picture of the third project where we created a level meter using 3 LED lights. This is a photo of the fourth project where we created a color mixing lamp. This project used the photoresistors as seen at the top to detect light. This light would change the ever-changing LED light down below. In Chapter 5, we created a mood cue. This was our first project using the potentiometer and the servo motor. In Chapter 6, we created a light-based theremin. This was our first project using the piezo to make sound. Here is a photo of the keyboard instrument we created in Chapter 7. This project also used the piezo, but in this case we used 4 separate buttons to create a keyboard-like interface. Each button produced a different sound. Here is a photo of the digital hourglass we created in Chapter 8. The hourglass was timed using the Arduino programming and was set to turn on a new light every 10 minutes. In Chapter 9, we created a motorized pinwheel using the battery and the AC motor. The button down at the bottom right was used to turn on the pinwheel. In Chapter 10, we used the battery and motor again, but this time added more wiring and a second button to create a reverse form. We also added the potentiometer to change the speed of the motor. In Chapter 11, we created the crystal ball. Up at the top left, you can see the tilt sensor, which was used when the Arduino board was moved or tilted to change the ball. This is similar to a black 8 ball, and that every time you shake it, you get a different message. The potentiometer must be used with the LED light to adjust the contrast. In Chapter 12, we created the knock lock. This Arduino programming was able to measure knocks to change the direction of the servo motor. It also included a piezo and 3 LED lights. In Chapter 13, we created a touchy-feely lamp. The wire you can see that goes off to the left measures touch. The heat received by this wire is used to change the light in the center. The LED light varies in strength depending on how much heat is added. This project required us to download a separate library from the Arduino website. In Chapter 14, we used a simple setup in addition with a new processing software to tweak the Arduino logo on the internet. As the potentiometer was turned after it was connected to the computer, it would tweak the logo that was downloaded. I completed my final project of this rather obnoxious monkey doorbell in 2 separate phases. In the first phase, while I was trying to program the doorbell, I noticed that the button on the original doorbell was broken. In order to hack the doorbell button, here's the wiring that I used, you can see here. The button was then replaced by the button in the middle on the Arduino board here. This setup simply allowed us to control the button when pushing the button in the middle. It did not require being connected to the computer via USB. Up next is a video of what happened when I pressed the button when I did the first hacking. For the second part of the project, in order to get a more sophisticated hacking job, for more interesting product, and to get an A in the course, I decided to add the LED light. The LED light, in turn, would produce a message when the doorbell was rung. This is a picture of the wiring of the Arduino board before I added the LED light. Here is what happened when I added the light and synced it with the Arduino software that I created. Initially, before the doorbell was pressed, the doorbell message would read that the doorbell is idle, indicating that no one has pressed the button. When the button is pressed, it indicates that there is a visitor present. This type of interface might be very useful to someone who is hard of hearing or far away from the sound source. That way, there are both visual and audio cues that the bell has been pressed. Here is a video of the use of the final product. The use of this innovative project for hacking indicates that I get an A in the course because of its sophistication. In the next part of the course, students did a cultural science project. My cultural science project required watching the documentary Stress, Portrait of a Killer which is a National Geographic film. In this film, researcher Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University studied stress in human and baboon subjects. Because of his findings, he came to the conclusion that stress is very detrimental on people's health. For my submission of this project, I wrote up a 2-page paper on the documentary. In this paper, I did a little bit of research and found scientific backing behind the findings in the movie. Because of the complexity of my paper and the research I included, I received an A for the project. For our last final project of the course, we wrote up a controversial debate. My controversial debate topic that I wrote about was about homeopathy and whether or not it is efficacious. I wrote well-researched and backed-up views on both the pro and con sides of homeopathy. After doing my research, I found that it's obvious why there is so much controversial debate on this topic, because there are such differing views on homeopathic medicine for medical professionals all around the world. Students in the class were required to write up a controversial debate if they had an A. Although other students that didn't exactly expect an A didn't write a controversial debate, they still read and commented on other students. I also read all the other students' controversial debates and wrote my own comments on the topics. It was very interesting to read about the conflicting sides of all these very different controversial debates in science. Through my dedicated and sophisticated work in the class on the discussion boards, neat resources, weekly summary, Arduino projects, cultural science paper, and my controversial debate, I learned a lot about electricity and physics, and science and education in general. In addition, I produced well thought out and well-researched work that should lead me to get an A in the class. I thoroughly enjoyed the setup of this class as I'm a much more hands-on student. It was very interesting to use the Arduino board especially to do my own hands-on projects and figure out how electronics work. During the entire class, I probably spent about roughly 100 hours on the course, usually averaging from about 8 to 10 hours a week depending on the week. Generally, the Arduino projects took the longest, but were also the most interesting. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to teach me what I now know about electrical physics and education.